All right, so we got a file to download today, crime.zip. So it's a zip, it's a compressed folder, a zip archive. So go ahead and extract that, get those files open so that we can work with them. I'm assuming that you know what I mean when I say extract the zip file. Is there anyone who's like, I'm not quite sure how to do that on my operating system? We'll make sure that you get them extracted. So get that file downloaded, get it extracted. I think I've already done it here. So yeah, I've got a folder here called crime. It's extracted and it has all the individual files in it here. Did I tell you about this data? Did I tell you about the time the FBI called me? Did I tell you about this? It was like 2012, maybe 2013. I was on the internet kind of looking for some data, and I came across the FBI's website on crimes known to law enforcement. And this is pretty good data. And they had some information from, it was like crimes known to law enforcement that just happened on university campuses. I thought, oh, that's going to be pretty relevant. You know, we can look up our campus and we can see what kind of crimes are reported from BYU, and we can compare ourselves to the University of Utah. If we can't beat them in football, maybe we can beat them in crime somehow. And what's that? Yeah, I don't know. Whichever metric works better for us. We have some way to beat those guys. And so there's like a little note. If you would like the complete data set, email this number or email this, this email address. So I emailed the email address. I'm Professor Allen from Brigham Young University. I'd like the complete email. I'd like the complete data set. And 2 or 3 weeks later, I get a CD in the mail. Here's the data set. It's like 2013. I was kind of surprised. They're mailing DVDs, or it was a CD. It wasn't that much. It's a CD. And, oh, great. I got the data. I'm going to look through it. It's pretty good data. I was glad to have it. About a week later, I'm sitting in my office, and the phone rings. And I look over, and, of course, I have the little readout on it, and it says Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI is calling me. And I got to tell you, I live a really boring life. It's not like oh, they finally caught me. It's like there's nothing out there that they could have caught me for doing. And yet I had that moment of like, oh my gosh, what have I done? The FBI is calling me. I answered the phone, and I thought, I got to let them know I'm dealing from a position of power. I said, hello, this is Dr. Allen. How can I help you? And I said, Dr. Allen, did you receive from us a CD with some crime statistics on it? I said, yes, I am actually looking at it right now. Oh, thank goodness. That was our original, our master copy. Could you send that back to us? I thought, I was never so happy. I said, I'll pay the postage. That's all you want? Gladly. Gladly. So it must have been some intern, though. Finally someone has actually asked for, I must have been the first person to ask for the data ever. Some intern. Professor Allen needs this data. Get it to him straight away. Okay. I licked it, put it in an envelope, and off, So that's this data. And so let's just go ahead and take a look at some of this data. So why don't we just go ahead and bring up Utah. So utah.xlsx. And so here we have, I was kind of disappointed for 2011. Well, you're going to find out that we've got some other years that we'll be working with this data, not today. But we do have some statistics for BYU. And you will be pleased to know that we do outperform the University of Utah on one crime statistic, and that is arson. Dramatically more arson at BYU than there is at the University of Utah, so we can be proud of that. But the rest of this, motor vehicle theft, larceny, burglary, they blow us away. They're just like they do in football. So, okay. So our task today, what we're really after today, is working with the built-in file dialogues. But these are the files that we'll be working with. When I say built-in file dialog, you say file open and then browse. This dialog box that comes up is it's a dialog that we have the ability to manipulate. We can just say open up this dialog box and let us know what the user chose. It's not like it's in the process of opening a file. It's just open this up so we can see what they chose. We've got some other dialog boxes that are built in that we've used. The message box, right? You put up a message and the user clicks on a button. You can tell which button they clicked on. The input box, put up a message and they can type something in. We can see what they typed in. So it's the same idea, but the big difference between input box and message box, those are built into the VBA language. They're part of VBA. This is built into Microsoft Excel, or actually, more precisely, part of Microsoft Office. And so this is, they're objects that we have to manipulate, but they're still kind of in that same group because they're dialog boxes that we don't have to create from scratch using the forms like a user form. We can just use these. So that's what we're after. We'll be manipulating these files. And in case you needed more incentive to pay attention today, our next project, the next project that's due is the user forms project. But the one after that, the next project that we're going to be starting is the database manipulation project. It is universally agreed by all former students to be the most difficult project of the term. Good news is the last project that you're going to be doing when all the rest of your classes are giving their most difficult stuff, that project's actually pretty easy for this class. We're going to be getting a good start on that project today. So we're not doing anything with the database manipulation because we haven't learned that yet, but the whole point of that project is you've got these 50 files, you've got to open them, and you've got to read the data out of these files and put them into the database. Strange as it may seem, this is the way the FBI provides this data. It doesn't come in a comma-separated file. It comes like this. And so you've got to kind of go through and pull out the numbers and put them into a structure so it can go into the database. But today, we're going to get just to the point where we're getting comfortable manipulating these files individually. So I'm going to close this, and we'll open up a new workbook. We've got a blank workbook, and I'm going to save this workbook not inside the crime folder, but I'm going to put it right next to the crime folder. So that's in my downloads. And yeah, crime is at this location here. It's going to be an XLSM. So I don't want it with my data files, but I want it right next to the folder that has the data files in it. It's going to be the place you want this. And let's see, why don't I call this? Let's call this file dialog. Winter of 19. All right, so brand new workbook, Alt F11, and let's insert a module. All right, so our first task here, and I hesitate to do it because this is just like the example I pulled out of my head to do in the last class. And then almost all the way through it, someone said, isn't this exactly what the homework is that's due tonight? And I went, oh, that's why this sounds familiar. So because I did it for the other class, I guess I'll do it for you too, but we were about to solve the homework that's due tonight. So here we go. I'm going to do it in just a slightly different context, but it is, yeah, you'll be able to make the adjustment quite easily. So I'm going to make a function called getPath. I'll call it getFolder. GetFolder path. Now just getFolder. Now getFolder path. I don't know. GetFolder path. Okay, and of course we're going to use this. We're going to do this using the file dialog. So let's declare a variable. I'm going to call it FD, and it's going to be as an Office file dialog. Now, I could declare this just as an object. It would work just fine. So remember, an object variable is just a location in memory that allocates enough memory to hold the address of some other variable, of some other location in memory. This is just like a hop to some other object. The big benefit of actually declaring it as a specific kind of object is that we'll get good IntelliSense help here. So when we start working with this, we'll see the different properties and methods that we can work with. So does this create in memory a file dialog object? And the answer is no. It only allocates enough memory to refer to where that file dialog is created when we create it. Here's where we create the file dialog. Set FD equal to application dot file dialog. There is a method called file dialog that creates a certain kind of file dialog. And I'm going to do not the file picker, not the open or save as, but the folder picker. That's a great name, folder picker. So now I have allocated memory to hold a reference to the object, and I have called the file dialog method of the application that creates one of those file dialogs and binds it onto this object. It may just be that it accesses, maybe it's already created and it's just accessing where it is and returns the address of where it is, but I can bind that onto it now. So now I should be able to show the file dialog, and we'll see we've got the ability to pick a folder. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and here it is. It has opened up this dialog box. And now in downloads, I've got all kinds of files, but because this is the folder picker, it's only showing me the folders. If I come into my crime folder, there's nothing to choose there because there's only files in there. There's no other folders. But if I'm inside the folder, or even just one level up with the folder selected, either way, that's going to be the folder that gets returned when I say OK. And so that now has sent back the full path. I've identified for the user the full path of the folder that I'm interested in. But where did it send it? Where did it go? And the answer is a little bit strange. Here's how it works. It turns out that the file dialog object can select multiple objects. Now, folders, it can always pick one at a time. But if it's files, you could pick this file, that file, the next file. You can pick, every file, and you can pick a bunch of files. And so it's possible, again, when you're working with files, not with folders, but it's possible for this object to select multiple items. And so the way that we know what's chosen is with the selected items collection. Ooh. Debug.print fd.selected items. It's a collection, and so I'm just going to refer to the first one in the collection. As it turns out, since you can only pick one folder, it's going to be in the first position of the collection. It's not like you got to guess where it is. Well, I'd only return one, but put it in the 9th position. No, it's going to be in the first. It's going to be the only item that's there. So now, let's see. Open up my immediate window, and I'll run this again. It brings up the dialog box. I'll choose the crime folder. We'll say OK. And now it has printed the full path to that folder that I selected. Incidentally, if I were doing this on Mac, I'm trying to think. Actually, I don't think that the file dialog objects are available in Mac. There is kind of one way to do it, but it's a little bit different. Now, but we have a problem here. Watch this. I'm going to run this again. I've had second thoughts. Instead of saying OK, I'm going to hit cancel. And that's a problem. Invalid procedure call or argument. Tell me what your gut says. What's the problem here? Why did this line fail? Go ahead. Okay, I didn't select anything, so there's nothing to print. You said the cause and the result, but you missed the structure in the middle. That's what I'm going after, which is the actual nature of the error. So you're right about that, but more specifically, what's the problem? What's the problem with this? I mean, look at this line and tell me where the problem is, or tell me why it's a problem. No? Go ahead. So this code assumes that there's something in the collection. It assumes that there's at least one. Let's find out. What would happen if this is a collection? What method or what property has to be there? That's interesting to me right now. Count. All collections have a count property. This is how many items are in the collection. And right now, I didn't select anything. There's nothing in the collection. And so here I've assumed that it's one. So I could come here and say, well, let me first check it. Is the count of the file dialog selected items greater than 0? And then go ahead and print it. But it turns out they've anticipated this. So let's look at this. In fact, instead of just doing fd.show, let me do a debug.print of fd.show. This is strange. This code looks really unusual, actually. Somebody tell me what must be true about this method if I can print it. What's it going to do? You're going to print like the source code of the method. There's like some kind of internal code that's actually happening when I say fd.show. I'm not printing the method. I'm not printing the code of the method. So when I say print that method, what must be going on? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, maybe there's a default folder, and that might be the direction, except remember, this is how we get at the item that's actually selected, some default folder. And so this isn't going to be a default folder or like the current location of wherever we're thinking of. To print any method, what must be true? It's sending back a printable value. It's sending back something that can be printed. So let's just go ahead and run this and see what it prints. I'm going to select crime, say OK, and it printed -1. That's this statement. And then it printed the one that I selected. Whoa, that seems like a really strange thing to send back, -1. Look at this. I'm going to print false. And that prints false. That's delightful. But what if I convert this to an integer? What do you think that's going to print? Yeah, the integer version of false is 0. So what's the integer version of true? Let's go the other way. I'm going to leave you in suspense on that one for just a moment. What if I did this? Convert to Boolean. That's the opposite. I'm just flipping this the other way. Let me take 0 and convert that to Boolean. What do you think it's going to be? Let me false. And so let me put in 1. What do you think it's going to do? Yeah, look at that, true. But here's the trick. It's not just that 1 is true. It's that anything besides 0 is true. That's true too. They're all true. Every number is true except 0. Even the negative numbers are even true. -1. That's true. So when I convert true to an integer, it actually converts it to -1. I don't know why they chose -1 to be like the default that it converts. It could be any number. I would have chosen 1. They're probably, I mean, these guys were smart people who wrote the language. I mean, they're no slouches. There's probably a really good reason. I just don't happen to know what it is. And so what this is really doing is it's returning true. If the user chooses an item, it returns true. If the user doesn't choose an item, it returns false. And so we can use that to our advantage here. So what I can do here is I can say, aha, if fd.show, which itself will be either true or false, then I'll do that printing. Otherwise, I won't. See, let me do a little bit better on my indenting here. So by the way, if you ever wondered, does true equal 10? The answer is false. I was kind of surprised by that. Does true equal -1? Yeah, it does. So it must be converting it. Interesting the way it converts it. I wonder if true equals 1. Oh. So the only comparison this way, I mean, if I was to actually convert to Boolean over here instead of leaving it this way. So that just means it's converting true to its number value and then doing the comparison there. It's not converting -1 or the operation here to its numeric value or to its Boolean value. Okay. This is a little bit strange. Who agrees with me that looking at this statement here now is weird? Yeah, this is kind of different. But it turns out it's a really common approach, not just in VBA, but in all languages. So if we have some activity that we need to call, and there's kind of 2 options on the way this thing ends up, it's really common to have that thing return true or false, and then you can just decide what to do based on what it returned with an if statement. And so now we're only going to print this if it returns true. So that should take care of the problem. Let me go ahead and run this. I will choose a folder. It prints it just fine without error. Let me delete all of this. Run this again. Choose a folder and then change my mind. You know what? I want to cancel. So no error. but it didn't ever print this line because it figured this out was false. And I said, great, get us out of here. You know, just jump to the end and keep going. So now, now instead of printing that result, we just want to make this function equal that. And so we will just set the name of the function equal to that value. And we'll have it return a string. So now I should be able to come up here and say get folder path. Should let me choose the folder I'm interested in. And it just prints it out. So I'm guessing you could probably convert this to do the homework, or just make another subprocedure that calls this and returns the value of the function into the active cell or whatever cell the homework tells you to do it. Questions? All right, let's make one that's a file chooser. I had enough of the picker. Here, let's use file chooser. So we'll make another function. We'll just call it choose files. Choose files. I will have this return a string as well. In fact, we're going to get this one set up very similar. But instead of this being the folder picker, it will be the file picker. Questions so far? Let's take a little bit different approach to how we decide what to do if the user cancels out. So instead of saying if fd.show then, I'm going to say if not fd.show. Okay, so what does it mean if fd.show returns false? Yeah, user pressed cancel. So if the user pressed cancel, this will be false, and so this will be true. So now we're going to execute what happens here if the user presses cancel. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say exit function. By the way, what will this function return if the user presses false? The dialog box is going to show up and the user is going to press false. What will it return? Return something. No, it won't return false because it's got to return a string. And so fd.show is going to be -1 or false, or it's going to be 0 or false. But what's the function going to return? Yeah, empty string. The default, because I've never told it what to return, it will return the default value for its type. So if it was a Boolean, it would return false, but it's not Boolean, it's a string, so it will return the default value for string, which is a 0-length string. All right, now, so now if we ever get this far, it means the user chose a file. Because if the user didn't choose a file, we would have exited from here. I like this approach better than this one as an if block because if essentially what we're saying is if the user presses cancel, we're done. There's nothing else to do here. Then it allows me to work the rest of my code without it being nested inside of any other structure. If I have the choice to say, I've got a couple different ways I could do this. One is to nest it inside of something else. One is to not nest it. I prefer to not nest it. Why? Because nesting makes your code more complex. We say, I've got to come into this structure. Even if it's a pretty simple structure, it makes your code more complex to be nested. And so this is nice. It accomplishes the same thing. I only execute the stuff after I show the dialog box if the user pressed OK. It's the same in both cases, but this way I do it without nesting, and so that's a little bit better. OK. Well, let's go ahead and get this one returning its value, and then we'll kind of extend it a little bit more. So choose files equals selected items 1. And I should be able to call choose files. You go ahead and make an Acme sub runner here. I'll just print the results of this. So I'm picking a file, and here, that 5 must have been me typing the 5, which is next to the F5 on my keyboard. But here it has, given me back the full path of what that function does. But the very fact that I've named this thing choose files instead of choose file means I must have something more in mind. And I'm curious to know if it's already there. Can I choose multiple files? Hold down the control key and choose another one. Yeah, look at that. I can choose a bunch of them. So now I've chosen several of them, and I say OK, but it's still only returned one. Why only one? Yeah, I only told it to return one. So what are we going to have to do? Something a little bit more involved. So let's go ahead and, at this point, let's just, instead of returning the values just yet, let's just go ahead and print them off. So I'll declare a control variable, so dim x as an integer. We comment this line out for now. Oops. And we'll make a loop. For x equals 1, 2, selected items dot count. Next. Debug.print. Selected items sub x. And why don't we go ahead and print x as well. Now it'll print 1, and then whatever item selected 2, whatever item I selected, and so forth. Now, we're not returning the value yet. The function is just printing it out. So I'll go ahead and run this. I'll select 3 files. File dialog, that, and this PDF file I've got. And there's those 3 files, PDF and a couple of XLSMs. So far, so good. But I'd like to return these as a comma-separated string. So my function is going to return a single value. And I got 3 file names, so I got to do something to kind of put them together into one value to send back. And so let me declare another variable up here. I'll just call it temp as a string. And then instead of printing this, I'll say that temp equals what it used to be concatenated with a comma, concatenated with whatever that current selected item is. So first time through the loop, temp will be a 0-length string, so it's going to be a 0-length string with a comma and then the first item. And then we'll concatenate on the second item, the third item, and so forth. Which means when I'm done, it'll be perfect, except I'll have a leading comma. So now that it's time to return something, I'll set the name of my function equal to the mid of temp, beginning with the second character. I'm going to skip the first character, which is that comma, which I know is there. And there has to be at least one value there, because if the user clicked cancel, we never made it here. We would have jumped out of the procedure right here. So now, if I run my runner, it's going to print the results of choose files. So that should give me a comma-separated list of the items that I selected. I'll choose, again, 3 files. And now I'm returning that as a comma-separated list. How are we feeling so far? All right, show me on your hands, signal of 0 to 5, how comfortable you are with this. 5 means, yeah, we got this. I'm seeing some 5s, some 4s, a couple of 3s, but mostly 4s and 5s. Okay. That's too many 4s and 5s. Let's make it a little more complicated. So it turns out that we have the ability to decide whether it can be multiple or not. Maybe we only want the user to be able to choose one. And so let's come up and put a parameter on this. And let's say allow multiple. Just allow multi as a Boolean. So we can now send a true or false, and we'll let the whoever's calling this decide, can we select multiple files or are we only selecting one? And so in between when we set it up and when we show it is where we configure that object. So I'm going to come just before the show, and I'm going to say, all right, fd dot, and it turns out it has a property called allow multi-select. I'm going to set that equal to allow multi. So we are expecting now for the user to pass this in. And if we say pass in false, so here's where we're, whoops, debug.print, choose files. In parentheses, I pass false. Now allow multi is going to be false. We're going to set allow multi-select equal to false. And so now when we run, we should only be allowed to select one. I'll hold my shift key down, and it does not allow me to select multiple ones. My control key down, no effect. We can only now select one. So we're just allowing our function to be specified and passing that value into configure the file dialog. Let's do one more thing here. Oh, question? Yeah, the question is, well, how do we let it go back to selecting multiple? We change it to true. Now, when we make the call to choose files, we're passing true. That gets received. So here's, choose files. That gets received in multi-select, so that will be true. And so that means we'll be assigning true to the allow multi-select property of the file dialog. And so now, well, let's go ahead and run it, is that this should allow us to select multiple ones. And if we look at the immediate window, we'll see that somewhere is that list that I'm not sure which of these top 2 lines it is, but it's one of those 2. Now, most years I don't teach what I'm about to teach because it doesn't really fit in anywhere, except we kind of happen to be reasonable to talk about it right here today. And that is, every time so far when we have said that we're ready to call a subprocedure or a function, if it has parameters, we've got to give a value to every single one of the parameters. Well, wouldn't it be nice if we could say, you know what? Let's just, almost always we want this to return, to be a particular way. So we don't have to specify it unless we want it to behave differently from normal. We want to give it a default value. Well, in that case, we can make this parameter optional. I put the word optional right in front of it. And now I don't have to specify any value here when I call the function. Don't even need the parentheses. Now, what do you think? Is this going to allow multi-select or not allow multi-select? Some are saying yes, some are saying no. It's going to be true or false. So flip a coin, take your pick. But I think you can make a little more educated guess. If we don't specify a value for that variable, what's it going to be? It'll be its default value. Yeah, it'll be false. So without specifying it, allow multi should be false, and so this should be a single select. I'm going to hold my shift key down, and yeah, it's to no effect. But what if I wanted the default to be true? It's really easy. right after the data type, I just say equals true. And that will be the default value if it's not specified. So now if I just run it without the parameter, it should be a multi-select. Yep. Well, let's not stop there. Let's add another argument. And let's add another argument. We'll call it the mask. Mask as string. Whoops. string. As soon as you make an optional property, an optional parameter, every other parameter that comes after that has to also be optional. You can have required parameters, 3 or 4 required parameters, and then you make one that's optional. Everyone else after that has to be optional. So this mask needs to be optional as well. So what we're going to say is we're going to let you specify what kind of files you want. You want just Excel files, text files, JPEG files, or whatever. And so that's what this is going to be. So again, here where we're configuring this, say FD, and then there's a property called filters. FD filters dot, and it's an object itself, clear. I'm going to say, listen, I don't. If there's any other filters on this, get rid of them. I don't want any filters. And now let's say if the user supplied a mask. By the way, if the user doesn't supply a mask, what's the value going to be? A zero-length string, an empty string. So if mask is greater than a zero-length string, greater than empty. When you're first starting off, you say if it's different, if it's not equal to empty, if it's anything besides empty. And the way we read that is if mask is not equal to empty. But it turns out the very smallest string you could possibly have, by the way, have we even talked about comparing between strings? Which one's bigger, A or B? Yeah, B. All you have to do is look at the ASCII value. It looks at the ASCII value of the number. So B, as long as they're both uppercase or both lowercase, B is going to be bigger than A. So, space is like 32, so space is smaller than all the letters. The very smallest one you have is a zero-length string. Nothing is smaller in string comparison than a zero-length string. And so there's no reason to say the less than part. You just say greater than. And this actually makes the code a little bit easier to read once you understand what's happening with string comparisons, because we've gotten rid of the not. Not as soon as you put not into something, it's like one more level for your brain to deal with. Kind of the same thing as having a preference for not nesting something, for avoiding nesting if you can. Here, we'd like to avoid the not if we can. And since the very smallest possible is zero-length string, there's no reason to consider the less than condition. And so typically we'll say, is it greater than a zero-length string? And so if the mask is greater than a zero-length string, that means it was supplied. Then, I'll do this with a block if. Oops. Then I'm going to say fd.filters.add. Now, I can put a description here like Excel files, like in English, Excel files. That's the first thing. I'm going to skip the filter. I'll just put a zero-length string for that. And then the extension is what I'm passing as the mask. And we can have multiple of these filters included. You know how when you drop down the list, you can say what kind of files do you want to show, and it says there star.txt or star.csv or star.xlsx. I'm just adding the one here, but we could add multiple as well. And as soon as you add multiple, you can set one of them as the default, but that's beyond what we're going to cover. But I just want you to realize there's a lot more flexibility here. So now we'll say choose files, and I'll put false, because I want it to be just a single file. And I want it to be star.xlsx. And so now when I run this, oh, let's see, all files is there. Ooh, that didn't work the way I was supposed to work. Let's go back. What have I missed here? Optional mask as string. Oh, I need the parentheses, thank you. It thinks I'm trying to print all this stuff. So parentheses around the argument list. Because I'm doing something with the return value of this. I'm printing it. All right, so now the only filter I have is XLSX. And so I'm only seeing XLSX files. I got lots of other files. I think I even chose before a PDF. It's not visible because the filter now is set to XLSX. By the way, I think the user can change that. They can come in here and say star.star and hit enter. And that will then show everything. So this is not preventing the user from getting access to it, even if they don't know that trick of changing it. Go ahead and choose this filter. I don't even know how to change it back. Star.xlsx. If they know the name of the file that's here, even though it's not shown, they type that name of that file in, it'll still find it and return it. So it really is just saying what's going to be shown without putting any other constraints on what it's able to return. So we'll select exit city U. I have no idea what that is. That should have printed exit city U.xlsx. Okay. That's pretty much as I wanted to cover with the built-in file dialog. There's a couple other ones. There's open and there's save as. The open and save as are really similar to the ones we've seen here so far, except it just says open. The button says save as. So it's kind of giving you the ability to specify that. Go ahead. What if you want just the file name instead of the whole path? And the answer is, I don't think that there's a built-in function for that, but what might we do if we want to be printing the file name instead of the full path name up there? I'm going to leave my choose files the way it is. This is going to be sending me back a comma delimited string. In this case, it's just going to be 1, no comma involved because I've said false here. So what could I do? Any thoughts? In the back? So we can search for the last slash and then pull everything after that last slash, or we could split it using the slash as the delimiter, and then we could take the highest element from that array. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're limited to in terms of what's built into VBA. Okay. So now what I'd like to do is kind of get us started on project 5, the part that's really about manipulating files and working with folders. And so, let's do this. Let's say we're going to have a subprocedure called process all. And then what I want process all to do is let the user pick a folder. It's a little bit different from the project. The project's going to tell you exactly how to find the folder relative to the file you're working on. We're going to let the soldier pick a folder. We're going to let the user pick a folder. So dim, I want to call this folder path as a string. We'll set the folder path equal to get folder path. So I mean, that's the first thing we wrote today was a function called get folder path. It just gives the path of the folder. So now we'll know the folder that we're trying to work with. Now, if the user cancels out of this, what's get folder path going to return? We run this. We'll run it. F5. Oh yeah, I got a great spelling on string here. Okay, so I'm going to pick a folder. I guess I'll pick my crime folder, which is the one I'm really after. And then I decide, no. Cancel. I don't want that. Do you remember what our function returns? Let's take a peek at the function. What does it return? First of all, if I cancel, do I ever execute this? No. I skip right by that. And so this is the only place I'm saying the name of the function equals something. Here's the only place I'm setting the return value. And so if I press cancel, what does it return? Nothing is incorrect. An empty string, yeah, it looks like nothing. When you look at it, it's really hard to see it. It's invisible, in fact, because it's a string with no characters in it. And so, let's do this. Right at this point, let's check. Let's say if folder path is equal to an empty string, then exit sub. That's the user saying they changed their mind. I don't want to do this after all. I pressed cancel. Great. Get us out of here. But now we're ready to work with that path. In fact, just because I know a little bit about what's coming up, I'm going to do something that may seem a little bit strange at this point. Let's do this. I'm going to now change folder path equal to something else. Folder path is going to be equal to what it used to be. Concatenated with, now as we look up here, what we're seeing is that this is the path separator for Windows. What's the path separator for Mac OS? It's not a backslash, it's a /. And so, even though it turns out our get folder is going to narrow us down to Windows anyway, I'd like to get familiar with working with this in a cross-platform way. Instead of putting the slash on the end, I'm going to want that slash on the end because I'm going to be putting something else on the end of it in a minute. I'm going to just ask the application, hey, what path separator do you use? And there's a property for that. Application dot path separator. And so on Windows, this is a /. On Mac, this will return a /. Just print the path separator. There it is, // /. But on Mac, that would return a /. Any of you have a Mac that you're following along? So far, the example hasn't worked for you because that Office Dialog is a Windows thing. But that'll print a / on Mac. Okay. Now, this next part is a little bit of a head scratcher. As it turns out, if you just Googled Excel VBA, how to get all the files out of a folder, chances are you're going to be directed to an object called the file system object, the Microsoft file system object, and it's an object that was written in modern times that allows you. It has objects that have properties and methods for iterating across folders and getting all the items that are in a folder and so forth. But again, it's limited just to Windows. There's a native way built into VBA that works across platforms for working with files and folders, getting the list of files. And to see that, I am going to run the Windows command prompt. Ooh. Oh, back in the early days of computing, this is all it was. You turned on your computer, and that's what it looked like. There's no Windows involved. It was just a black screen with some letters. And if you're curious to know what files you had in here, you typed in dir, and it would list off the files. Our very first computer that we had, no kidding, when you typed in dir like this, the list went by slow enough you could read it as it was going. It was just boom, boom, boom. Oh, plenty of time to read it. In fact, we got a newer computer, and we tried to do a directory. You couldn't read it. What do you do? Hey, wait a minute. How do we know? We had to figure out how to slow things down. But I'm going to change directories to my downloads directory. And from there, I'm going to change directories to my crime directory. And now I'll do a directory. Oh, now these are the files I'm actually after. And so this dir, this is the statement that I wanted to show you. But more than that, I can do wildcards. I could say star dot, or let's do this. Let's do just the W's. W star. So starts with a W and then has anything after it. Now I don't see all those files, just the ones that meet the wildcard. If I had some other like text files in there, I only want Excel files that XLSX. I only want Excel files that start with a W. Well, this is only Excel non-macro files. Maybe I want only Excel files. I don't care if they're XLSX or XLSM. The star is any character, any number of characters, including no character at all. The question mark is exactly one character. And so that should give me the same thing. But if there are XLSMs there, it would allow those through as well. XLSB is another file as well. How about XLS? Would this show XLS files? It wouldn't, because that question mark means exactly one character. If I put the star on there, it would show XLS files, because the star means any character, any number of characters, or no character at all. So there's some rules that you can do with these filters. Okay. So that's exactly what I'm about to show you over here in VBA. So I'm going to declare another variable up here. I'm going to call it file name as a string. And let me capitalize the N. Okay, so I've got my folder path. And now I'm going to say file name equals, give me the directory. Now, I got to tell it, what do I want to see in that directory? Well, I want the path the user specified, so folder path. And that is going to be whatever that path was, plus I've got another backslash on the end of it. And now I'm going to put the filter that I'm after, which is star.xlsx. That next argument is if you don't want files, maybe you want directories, or maybe you want files that are hidden, or system files, or archived files. There's kind of other things you can put here. But we're going to stop right there, just with the file name, because we're actually after files, not folders. Okay, now if I choose my crime file, how many files do I have in there that meet that criteria? It's almost 50. I'm not sure what states we're missing, but it's 48 files. But let me run to this point, and let's just take a look. Stop, and run this. I'm going to pick crime. It's all executed just fine. So let's see what is inside of file. Oh, inside of file name. It's not even a whole path. It's just Alabama. What's going on here? If I do that directory out here in the command prompt, I get a truckload. dir star.xlsx. 48 files. 736 bytes total. Wow. Oh, 736,000 bytes. Oh, my children, it was the 1970s. A strange time. The music was really bad. Hair was like an afro. We wore bell bottoms. I was too young. My parents would let me have an afro, but I did wear bell bottoms. I was like in the second grade. And programming was different. We're not doing objects in BASIC. There's no objects. There's no methods. There's no properties. And so the way the dir statement works is the first time you call it, it just gives you the first one off the list. You call it again, it'll give you the second one off the list. You call it again, it gives you the third one. As long as those subsequent calls don't tell it a different place to look. Watch this. Let me just do file name equals just dir by itself. I'm not telling it anything else, just dir. Right now, file name's Alabama. I'm going to execute this one now, and it should be Alaska. Let's take a look at file name. There's Alaska. What's next? Arizona? Arizona. So subsequent calls are just going to give it the next one off the list. This is weird. This is kind of a different approach to doing things, but this is what's built in and native to the language. And so, if we want to get them all, we're going to need a loop. We're going to do and a loop. Now, if you had to guess what's going to happen once we finally get to the end of the list, there's only 48 of them. When we get to the end of the list, what's going to happen? What do you think dir is going to return? There's a couple of reasonable guesses here. Wyoming will be the last one. Now, if I call dir again after Wyoming, what will it do? You know, one possibility is, someone say something. Okay, it may stay as Wyoming. Once you get to the end, it just keeps giving you the last one. That's a reasonable thing. It's not what it does. Other guesses? Oh, this would be terrible. It goes back to the very top, and then just keeps going through the end. Thank goodness they didn't do that. It doesn't do that either. Empty string. So I think that's another pretty good idea. Just send back an empty string. That is what it does. One other possibility could be an error. Thank goodness it doesn't give us an error. But that's how you know that it's gotten to the end, is that it gives you an empty string. So I am going to do until file name is equal to an empty string. And so I initially set my first file name outside the loop. That way I can tell it specifically what path I'm looking in, as well as which filter I want on it. And I thought I put this in, but, oh yeah, here it is. If folder path is blank, get me out of here. Good, okay. And then, is it possible that in this folder that I'm looking in, there's no XLSX files? That's totally possible. In that case, what is dir going to return on the very first time? Empty string. And so now we're going to do until it's an empty string. It's an empty string to begin with. And so all I really want to do is print off the lists at this point. So debug.print. And I want to print the full path. So folder path concatenated with file name. So is file name blank? No, there's something there. So we come in here and we print C:\/ whatever it is, and then Alabama. We then ask for the next file. This now becomes Alaska. We come back up here. Is it blank? No. So we print the full path and Alaska. Then we get Arizona and so forth. So now if I come back up here to the start, and let me clear off my immediate window and run that out, we now have all of the files that we need to process, full path including the file name. Ah, that's delightful. Questions here? Now, so the next thing that you're going to have to do with this is we have to open up each one of those files. You got to figure out how to work through the file, get all the data, create a structured query language insert statement, and insert that into the database. We haven't covered working with the database yet. We've got a couple of days that we're going to spend on that before you need to do that. But we do at least need to be able to open those files and work with them a little bit. And so let's go ahead and do that. And we have a couple of options. One, we can say, great, at this point, we've got the file, the folder name, and the file name. We can just start to open it up right here. But as it turns out, it's going to make our lives a lot easier during development is if instead of just having it inside this loop where we do everything, let's just have another procedure where we pass the path to it and say, hey, go process this file. Because then I could just call that procedure directly without having to, let's say I've got some problem happening in Texas. I don't know what's going on in Texas, but my code breaks when I get to Texas. I don't want to have to run through all the rest of them just to get to Texas. I'd like to be able to jump straight to Texas. And so instead of putting the code in here that actually does the work, I'm just going to call another procedure. This is called like process all or something. I'm going to call this process one. Let's process one, and let's send the full path to that procedure. Now we haven't created this procedure yet, so let's go ahead and create it. So I'll come up here. Here's process all. I'm going to make another one called process one. And I'm going to take like a file path as a string. Now I think I'm actually ready to open one of these workbooks. So let me declare a variable WB as a workbook. Set WB equal to my workbooks collection dot open, and I will open the file path. So whatever path gets sent into here, we're going to open that workbook. And then we're going to do a bunch of stuff with it. And we're going to close it. By the way, that's why I want to have an object variable here to refer to it so that it's easy to close and easy to refer to throughout my code. If I just open it, I would know that it's the active workbook, unless while this is running, someone else activates another workbook that happens to also be open in Excel. That would be okay, in which case that would become the active workbook. And so I prefer not to rely on which workbook's active, unless that's the way the user is communicating something to me. Activate this workbook and then run this code. Then it's okay. But in this case, I'm hesitant to just rely on the active workbook because something else could be going on in the computer. But now, when I open whatever the path that's to the workbook that's sent in, I'm going to bind that onto the workbook. I don't care which workbook's active. I can refer to that workbook by its object, variable. And by the way, this is my raw data. I'm opening up the raw data. If I accidentally change something in this file, I do not want to save it. And so, save changes, that's my argument here, is going to be false. So close that workbook without saving any changes that may have been made. So now, if I process all, it's printing off the path to all of these, and it's calling process one. Process one is not, it's nothing to be excited about. It just opens the file and closes it. But we should see it process through all of those. Go ahead and run it. I've got to pick my folder, crime. And here it goes, not very fast. Can you even see what it's opening? We're not quite seeing it. But it's going to go through 48. It's going to flash 48 times as it's opening up those files. I was kind of hoping we'd be able to see the file name somewhere showing up, but it's not to be. So yeah, it's not open very long, right? It opens it and then immediately closes it. Now, of course, we're going to want to put some code in there to do something with it, but yeah, maybe. Let's see if we can just hit pause over here. Control break. Do I even have a break on this keyboard? Control break, control function break. There we go. Yeah, do events probably would have helped, but you still had to be able to get to control break. And I'm not sure I have a break. I've got a pause key here, but I did something, and that, oh yeah, well, anyway, I was able to interrupt it. How far did we get, by the way? I got to South Dakota. We still had a ways to go. Okay, good, so let's stop that. Now, can I scroll down to the end of our process all? So, what we'd like to do then is I want to get to one of those files. I don't want to have, let's say I want to get to Utah. I don't want to have to go through, the first 45 states before I get to Utah alphabetically. And so that's the nice thing here about this structure is that process all just figures out the path and then, Control Z. Just figures out the path and then calls process one, but I can call that directly if only I had the path for the Utah file. I think I probably do somewhere. Here's Utah. Oh. So on my sub runner, I'll just call process one. And I will pass it the full path. Because remember, process all does, it figures out all the paths it's supposed to send. So process one can just send a single path and we'll get there. So let me put a break between here where I'm going to stop, or between where I close it. And now that should just open it up. And we've opened up Utah. Here's the Utah file. Let me open up another one. Let's open Alabama. Stop my code so it doesn't close Utah. That should open Alabama. And unfortunately, we're not seeing a whole lot here. But these are just the two files. This is what these files look like. Did we open up one of these files yet? Remember if we did. But here's Alabama. So here's what the data. We've got all the different colleges that have reported or that the FBI is reporting on. I don't know if when it's missing, it seems a little strange here. We've got University of Alabama, Huntsville, but the Tuscaloosa campus isn't reporting. I don't know why, but here we go. And so what do we see here? We see their enrollment, 7,000 students. You're kidding. The Huntsville campus of the University of Alabama only has 7,000 students? Interesting. They had 3 violent crimes for all of 2011. What was it? It looks like an aggravated assault and 2 cases of rape. And so this violent crime is a summary column. It's a summary of the next 4 columns. Property crime, they had 104 instances of property crime. And that was burglary, larceny, a couple of motor vehicle thefts, no arson. Apparently BYU excels beats most campuses in arson. It was actually one year we had like 3 arsons in 1 year. Maybe that student has graduated, I don't know. Okay. So let's compare what we're seeing here with what we're seeing on Utah. There's a fundamental structural difference that's going to be a problem in this project if you don't deal with it. I'm going to help you deal with it today. Let's just kind of compare Utah structurally to Alabama. What is different? Number of rows are different. That's just the data. That's not really the structure of the page. We got a campus column. It turns out that when the FBI gives this data out, if none of the colleges have a separate campus, that column is gone and everything shifts over. That's a problem because you're going to have to insert the enrollment for each one of these colleges into the database. And so you got to figure out, is the enrollment is it in column B or is it in column C? Oh, it would be so nice if we didn't have to think about where enrollment is. So what can I do so that what can I do easily so I wouldn't have to think about where enrollment is? I could delete column B. Well, I don't want to always delete column B because I'd be deleting my enrollment on Utah. But you say, listen, if B5 says campus, we just delete column B. That'd be okay, except we need the campus data. So what's the other option? The flip side of that is what? Yes. What you could do is you could say, we got to figure out if it says campus here, and if it does, we don't have to offset. Otherwise, we have to offset and keep track of how far we have to offset. That's possible, but it's more work than I want to do. Yeah. If it doesn't say campus in B5, let's just insert a column. And that'll push everything over. It'll essentially give us a campus column even though we don't use it. I think that's a great choice. And it's really easy to do, so let's go ahead and do it. We've opened the workbook. Let's just say if we're a WB dot. Now, how do we get to B5? How do we get to B5? How do we go from the workbook to B5? This is the problem. We got to go to a sheet first. And so, how do I tell it which sheet I'm interested in? Well, active sheet. I'm not sure if the workbook's not active. I'm not sure the sheet is active either, but it might be. But for sure, there's only one sheet here, so it could be the first sheet. So wb.worksheets sub1 dot range. What did we say it was? B5. If the value of that I did mean worksheets 1, thank you. If the value of that is different than campus, then we got to do something. What do we got to do? That same worksheet dot columns to dot insert. Insert a column. Let's see. I'm going to close Utah so I can get my workbook variable hooked onto it again. I'll stop my code. I'm going to run right up to here. So that should run you. So Utah should be open. There it is, open. If it's not equal to campus, which it shouldn't be, Shift F8. Then we're going to insert that, and now that should have given me here. So we've now pushed this stuff over. It turns out we don't need column number 4. It's just the summary data. I'm going to delete column number 4. And that's whether I put something here or not. So worksheets.columns .delete. And now I've gotten rid of that one. Now I want to delete column number 8. The column number H over here. We'll delete that, and that'll give me just the data that I need. So I'm saying, listen, this is my source data. I don't want to make these changes permanent. Good heavens, I don't want to be messing with my source data. But why am I not worried about that? Because when I close it, I say false. We're not going to save the changes here. So I'm going to take the advantage to kind of organize this data to make it easy to work with, and then bring that data in. This is a big step in the right direction to getting that project done. So remember that we did this today, and I'll post this up on Learning Suite so you can go back and look at it and you'll have the video. All right, questions? Thanks for coming. Class dismissed. I'm missing what? Oh, Hawaii to Idaho are the ones that we're missing. I don't know why we didn't have data in 2011 from those, because they actually do have, real universities there.
For some reason, my process I'm having a hard time recognizing this. Is it just because there's
XLSX? Shouldn't.
So there should be a star.
And a star in front of it.
So now I should run. So when I click on crime.
And then say OK. There. Yep. Looks like it worked. You got the stop. Okay. It's not doing them all because you got to stop there in the middle of it. Do you want to save your changes?
Thank you.
Let me get this encoding. Make sure I've got this saved. Control S. Oh.